Falun Gong is not the only group persecuted by the Chinese communist regime, but it is the only group that has been openly targeted for eradication. This campaign is unprecedented in its scale, sophistication, cruelty, and longevity. Studying the genocide of Falun Gong provides a lens through which the world can understand the persecution of other faiths in China.
This is something no one in the world has done. Now, how anyone who has some kind of institutional memory in this field could walk away, I don't know how they could. So I don't really feel like I have a choice. I think the key thing that the tribunal did, the idea of the tribunal came from ETAC. Sir Geoffrey Nice was interested in ETAC and tried to help out, but we were not allowed to have contact with any of them. That's important to understand because the idea of the tribunal was to have a jury. It's really not a judgment, it's a jury. They're coming out and they're looking at the evidence, and what they did that was really important was not even the 5 days of witnesses, though that was critical and very helpful. What they were really doing was reading all the literature. This is something no one in the world has done, okay? Not a single government has looked at this literature. It's exhausting, it's a terrible process. I feel sorry for any journalist who approaches this issue because they're swamped with information. But by going through that information, I saw a transformation that took place with the tribunal themselves. The questions they asked between the December hearing and the April hearing are strikingly different. So I think what the world's been misunderstanding is here, and reporters, is to just focus on the conclusions. The conclusions to us were not surprising, but the key thing is not that, it's the process. That leads us to things, and you didn't ask the question, but I'm going to ask the question that's always on people's minds, which is, are the three of you, David and Ethan, are you Falun Gong practitioners? Are you married to a Falun Gong practitioner? And the answer is, David's a Presbyterian. I know, I went to his church. David Matus is a practicing Jew. I'm as religious as a cabbage. None of us have a financial interest. Personally, I didn't even write this book. Initially, I wrote this book because it was my second book on China, and Falun Gong was the biggest issue in China at the time. And that's what the book stemmed from. And around the time, I did the investigation, which took 7 years, the organ harvesting kept coming up. And so eventually I decided to paint the target around the hole I shot in the barn. My biggest question was why? Why does the Chinese Communist Party attack this group? What is the history of the conflict between the Chinese state and Falun Gong? There's a reason I can't move on. That's because the Chinese Communist Party has not stopped. They haven't stopped harvesting Falun Gong, and they've now opened up what I call Chinese organ harvesting version 2.0, and that is the Uyghurs. So now they've concentrated the entire population, or the largest pool of organs, into a single group in an area which can be defended, which they have perfect surveillance, but they don't allow anyone else in, really, other than to film some people doing silly dances in a camp. And they have a fantastic infrastructure. It's full of hubs, transportation hubs. This is the world we're looking at. This is a nightmare world. It is the version of what we've seen with Falun Gong, but it is speeded up like any new version. It's much more efficient and much faster. Now, how anyone who has some kind of institutional memory in this field could walk away, I don't know how they could. So I don't really feel like I have a choice. This is one of the things that has really been great about this movement is there are so many people out there who are doing their own research in their own independent way, and this is absolutely the way to do it. It's better that we're slightly even competitive with each other. This is a better system than having some sort of party group. We don't have a party group. Now, the Transplantation Society entered the picture in about 2012. and they negotiated with the Chinese for reform of the transplant system. They did this without ever mentioning prisoners of conscience. So in other words, they were addressing a problem that nobody would even name. There are lots of people from China in this audience. This is not how you negotiate. This is not how a Westerner negotiates in China. You are expected to be very direct and very forceful. Okay? This is a rookie mistake. Somebody who comes into China does not hire a fixer, does not hire somebody who can expose how to be polite, but at the same time firm. This didn't happen. So what we were left with was a terrible thing. We were left with the Transplantation Society cooperating in a cover-up of an ongoing crime. And this is where we are today. This was not inevitable. Right here, you've had Chinese transplant surgeons coming to our conferences, giving speeches, publishing in medical journals using data collected, as you know very well, from Falun Gong practitioners, directly from Falun Gong practitioners who went under the knife. This is unacceptable, but beyond unacceptable, we can see the main reason for this is money, is the financial positioning of China. And that is where the politics comes in. Because if and it has to happen with both sides. In other words, you need the political side saying, look, if you're willing to take a stand on this, if you're willing to, I'm not saying ostracize China, I'm not saying remove all economic connections with China. That's impossible. But it is not that hard to quarantine the Chinese transplant industry from the rest of the world, and that's exactly what has to happen here. And that starts in every country. I'm sorry I can't give a sort of a specific, I don't have specific knowledge of the medical system here and how the doctors work, but in truth, this has to be kind of a grassroots operation. So the one last thing I'd say is that whenever anybody asks me who's just a regular citizen, what can they do? I say, talk to your doctor, talk to your dentist, talk to your oral hygiene, I don't care. Just talk to them about this issue. Say, have you heard of it? A non-confrontational way. Have you heard of this? I heard this terrible thing. Well, I just wanted to say very quickly, if there's another country that's very worried about its survival, it would obviously be Israel. Yet Israel was the first country to ban organ tourism. And I know, having talked to some of the people who were involved in that there was a huge concern that they were going to lose this Chinese investment into their software, which is second only to military industrial, is their main export product by a mile. And the Chinese were the biggest investors, are the biggest investors in their software. So they felt that didn't happen. There were no repercussions. I don't even like to make this point that you can do this without sacrifice, but sometimes David's right. So in this case, he's really right. There was no sacrifice. It was partly because they didn't identify China, just the way David Kilgore was suggesting in the proposal. The Chinese leadership is guilty here. This is centrally run, and they know it. And they're fully aware of this. And so for that reason, they're actually they don't tend to mess with these things, and they don't tend to actually cause to put in penalties for countries which bring this up, even indirectly. That's just something I've noticed. This is a pattern. It surprises me too a little bit, but I think it's very important to recognize that you can actually continue to have a relationship with China, and at the same time you can do the kinds of things that David Manis was suggesting. And for that matter, it's very easy for the medical community to make a few steps fairly quietly initially, but if they're done in concert with a few other countries, you'd be surprised how quickly you can. An example: the Confucius Institutes, right? Now they're all over the place, and the fact is now they're retreating. They're in retreat, certainly in America. They're all out of Florida now. Once Florida took a stand, they're gone. It's happening all over the world. Is China, are there economic repercussions for Florida? No, not really. This is the kind of thing, so it is an illusion. It is an illusion that we're all comprised of small countries in a sense. Florida is a small state in a way. Okay, it's bigger than Denmark, but you get my point.
In a bit of climate.
Yeah.